Welcome to CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. I'm your host, Brandy Mabra. This is your one-stop shop to learn the business side of your practice on a deeper level. On this show, we empower you to own your CEO status to scale your practice for growth, sustainability, and profit. Listen in as we talk about how to market your practice to gain more visibility, hire, build, and engage your ride or die dream team, create streamlined operations, and make financial decisions as a CEO. It's time to show up as a confident leader to create a practice and life you love. Let's get started. Hello. Welcome to another episode of CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. It is Brandy Mabra here, and I am so excited about today's conversation because it is one that I wasn't expected to talk about. And it wasn't one that I was expected to talk about this time last year either when I was asked to talk on this particular topic. And it's really fun to think how when people see you, sometimes people see more in you than what you see in yourself. And so this is going to be a fun topic to break down. It's also going to be, I'm going to be honest with you, it's feeling a little intimidating for me because of the fact of the topic. So today, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Today, we're talking about how to tell your story to get featured. And this is a CEO guide that I created. And so inside of Private Practice CEO, it's actually a guide that all of our clients get. And it came from the birth of me being asked to speak to a group from Tanira Madadi. I was really taken back when I was asked to speak to her group about how to tell your story to get featured, right? And because I've been able to get featured, and I just didn't think that it was, I don't know, something that people would ask me to actually do. Her business has been valuated at $1 billion. And so she has sold her business for a lot of money. And so I was expecting to be like, well, but my topic of conversation is teams. I talk about teams and leadership and, how to have an engaged team, how to hire your ride or die dream team, how to make more money, how to definitely set up your practice to be profitable, operations, key performance indicators, metrics. Like, that's my thing. And they're like, no, we want to talk about how you've been able to tell your story to get featured. I'm like, oh, okay. So, looking at the inventory, I have been featured in a lot of places. And even though I've worked with a PR agency, I also was able to get my story featured even outside of that just by telling my story. So there is something here. There is something that I started to recognize that there's a skill set that I've been able to develop in order to build more authority when it comes to my business. Now, we have clients who also want to build authority when it comes to their specialty, whether if it's their personal stories or why they've started their practices. We've had clients get featured in a number of different places, which is amazing to watch. And usually it's because they have a very authentic, transparent story or mission and vision for why they do what they do. And so in today's times, people are tired of fake. They want authority, like authenticity as you're building authority, and they really want to see the personal side of you. And so even when it comes to my Instagram, there's a reason why I show pictures of like my son. For a number of years, I was a single mom. It was just me and my son. My son's name is Braylon. And there was an apartment that we moved into, it was B2. And so we were like B squared, Brandy and Braylon, we were the Brandy and Braylon crew. And so now fast forward, I'm a part of a blended mom or blended family of 4, and I'm a bonus mom. And so, I love the life of where we're at now. But there's some gems that come from that story, right? And so I've been featured from being a single mom. And actually when I moved here, if you look me up, I moved to North Carolina where I'm at now, originally from Ohio, and I moved without a car, without a job, with my last paycheck, and my son was a toddler. And I moved, and I was like, there has to be something better than what we got going on. Let's go. And so I just moved, and I knew God was going to work it out. And he has, that's how I've been able to build my amazing career into where I'm at today. And so it was the job that I got that catapulted me to the C suite to be able to talk about practices, being able to talk about the business side of practices with the passion that I have and the leadership side because I took that leap and I've been featured for it. numbers of times. So some of the headlines have been, what is it, from bankrupt single mom to CEO of her own company. That's a sexy title. From single mom to six-figure CEO. At this point in time, I've made way more money. What is it? Like just some of it, and so it's because of my story. I've been featured just talking about how to overcome obstacles and not to give up and to keep going. And so even with the framework that I talked about a couple weeks ago on the podcast, 3 steps to get the life and business you want, a lot of it was, I take it from life stories. And so there's a lot of things that I come up against even today where it might rock me and make me nervous, but I've been through worse. And it always has worked out. Your story, when you start to tell your story and be intentional about your story, then there is a lot of great gains on the other side of that. And so there are some people who show up and share a story because they're trying to just kind of creepy. But for me, I truly wanted to tell my story. People need to know that there's life outside of what you're going through and that you can still have an amazing life and still do amazing things, and you're not just your situation. You're more than that. And so when I told my story, that was really what I was trying to get across. From a financial perspective, what's happened is that there's a lot of mindset things that I've had to overcome, and especially stepping into the business space and making more money. I've always been six figures, and so there was like a time where it's like the self-sabotaging too, because when I got into my career, being in the C-suite, being in management, six-figure salaries. So six figures isn't new to me. It wasn't something like when I first started, be like, oh, six figures. That's not sexy to me because I already know what that's like. I know what it's like to make that kind of money and what to do with that kind of money. The part that I'm having to work through, I'll be honest, is not sabotaging myself to put me in that same safe space, because that's what I know in six figures. So when we're talking about seven figures, when we're talking about building wealth, it's been interesting to watch some of the things that I've had to do financially in order to make sure that I'm still continuing to build wealth and still being able to make more money, because that's a constant sabotage thing that I'm going through, right? So when we're talking about like systems, financial systems, when we're talking about making sure that you have the right financial partners, all of those things, I'm speaking from a space of true authenticity and experience because of my story and because I know what it's like. So when I say I don't want you to be broken, I am speaking from a true state of passion and a true state of purpose, because I don't want you to be that person, because I know what that feeling is like because of my journey, if you were to look at my story. So when I was asked to talk about it, I was like, oh, okay. So I created a whole guide. And so private practice CEO, our clients ended up being able to benefit from it because it's a formal guide. And so I'm actually going to go through the guide with you today. So it is a treat where I always like to give you some behind the scenes of what's happening inside a private practice CEO and some of the access tools that our clients get. And so we'll talk about this to help you get featured. I want you to be able to help more people. And I know that you can do that outside of just working in your practice every day. So whether if you're speaking on a stage, whether you're writing a book, whether you're making an influence, you can do that in a number of different ways. And it doesn't have to be on social media. One of the things that I was asked was on a consultation call, and she was saying, I want to market my practice, but I don't want to have to be on social media. And so I do. I have seven-figure practice owners who are on social media. Most of the seven-figure practice owners, I'll be honest, aren't on social media. They don't have large followings. They are in the middle of maybe trying to build a following, but they're not all out there like, hey, I have a seven-figure practice. Most times they're moving in silence. But behind the scenes, they're doing a lot. They're doing a lot for their community. They're doing a lot to build their referral networks. They're doing a lot to make it the impact that they need to make. And so now they're in a place where they're like, okay, I want to build a personal brand. What does that look like? How am I able to do more? I really would love to write a book. I've been writing a book for years. And so now that they're practicing in a place where they can actually start to do some of these things, those are the conversations that are happening. We have other clients who are just guns a-blazing, and they are like, no, I'm not waiting. And so they've been able to get featured in a lot of great places. And so we have clients who work with PR agencies. We have clients who get featured on their own. For me, I've worked with a PR agency, and I've also been able to get featured on my own as well. And so you can do both. So if you're thinking like, I can't get published because I don't have a PR firm, That's not true. That is not true. You just need to know your story, but you also have to sit through and identify your stories. So, one of the things that I did, and this is actually an exercise we have our clients go through when they're establishing what their mission is, what their vision is identifying like what their transformational stories are. It's an exercise that I went through years ago that my coach actually put me through. And it was really telling. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of great things that I've overcome and why I'm getting to a place where I want to help others and why I've always been in a place where I'm like, there has to be more than this. And it was because of the stories, like the pivotal stories, like filing bankruptcy or like being a single mom, or when I was little, the lights were cut off and we're sitting there by candlelight or heating hot water on the stove because the gas got cut off, or eating macaroni and cheese and baked beans. My dad made like a casserole. It was disgusting. Yeah, made like a casserole because that's all the food that we had in the house. So when you're thinking about how did you get to where you are today, what does that look like for you? Because I guarantee you all the stories that once you start to sit down and think about it, is going to get you to a place of now I see what God was doing. And now I see why I do what I do. And so even going back to me moving to North Carolina, the reason why I did that was because I knew that there was something waiting for me on the other side of this. And so fast forward to today, I'm recording this podcast. And that's why. That is why. So all your stories are connected. But here's the thing, there's obstacles when it comes to telling your story effectively. And like I said, even as I'm talking, I'm going to be honest. Like, I'm like, ooh, they're going to have to erase this. Ooh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Oh, goodness. People are going to think bad of me because I'm sitting up and telling them this story. And that's normal and that's natural. But at the same time, people need to know, and I believe that people have a better appreciation for it. And when I talk about my story, people more or less resonate with my story, which is why they end up working with me. There was a podcast episode where I talked about my army hat. Like if you have looked at my Instagram, you will see there are sometimes where I wear hats. And the reason why I wear hats is because I am natural. My hair is thick and it does a lot on its own. So even with as beautiful as this weather is right now, there's humidity in the air. And so it will frizz. And so even though I get it done at this point in time every 2 weeks, we talked about that a couple weeks ago, how that's my system. I get it done every 2 weeks, it still gets frizzy. And there are times where I have bad days or I don't feel like doing my hair. So if you see me in my army fatigue hat, that is why. Brandy is either having a bad hair day, her hair's too thick, or she is she is like she's getting it into something. She's going through a season and that is where she's pushing through and doing more. So I had someone who ended up working with me. They showed up to the call and they said, I heard your podcast and about your hat. And I resonate with that so much because I'm natural and my hair curls up, and that's what they loved about me. So at the end of the day, when you tell your story, you're not coming from this place of, oh, I have to look perfect, or oh, I have to say the perfect thing, or I have to look like I know exactly what I'm doing. No, no, people are past that. People are so past that. People want to know you as a person, especially if you're sitting up there trying to help them, get well, or if you're trying to build a personal brand. So it's the opposite. And I think a lot of times the clients that we work with, they have a hard time with that. We talked about that even with Jessica, with websites when it comes to healthcare branding. A lot of times they're boring. And it's because there's like this professional persona that we have to put on all the time. Like it's like a mask. Like I'm not going to be able to practice medicine or give you a really great care plan or know about your mental status because I am a human being too, and so we're not perfect. None of us are made to be perfect. And it doesn't diminish any of your skill set or what you have going on or how smart you are or how well you can take care of a patient or a client because you've gone through things. No, that actually makes you more attractive as a person. So when you're stepping into this space and you're telling your story to get featured, there's a couple different ways that you can do it. You can talk about it authentically. We had a retreat last year and Kobe Campbell came and talked about her story. And with her, she has a whole book, like a whole book. At this point in time, she's been featured in a number of different places. She has her practice that has now been scaled down because she's doing a really amazing things out in the space. But she talked, her whole book is based on part of her personal story and how she's gotten to the place where she is. So there's the ability for you to make a bigger impact if you are actually just honest with things and you're just authentic with how you need to show up. It definitely is powerful, and people a lot of times have a hard time with it. So, there's the first thing of getting past fear of what people will think, and so that is the first obstacle. You have to get past the fear of what people will think. Everybody is going to have an opinion. Everybody. If you're able to get past what people are thinking, then the doors will open up to you. And I'm not saying that you have to show up and divulge like all of your stuff, like all the junk, but you can talk about some nuggets of great information that can help other people, you know? And so when you start to come from a place, again, of authenticity, people resonate with that. So for me, I am a Black woman. The way that I grew up, I did not grow up with money. How I've been able to overcome, a lot of the money mindset stories that I tell myself, or money conversations that I've had to overcome. Like, I am fighting all of that. What I know is that my clients who end up potentially working with me, and when I talk about this, they resonate with that. So I try to be very honest with that. There are single moms who have ended up working with me over the years. And when I show up and I talk about, hey, I understand that plight. And I understand when you and up are trying to, do all the things. So for me, I was trying to grow a career in management, go to school to get additional education because I felt it was important, plus take care of a baby and a toddler and a 5-year old, during the course of that time. Like, not all three kids, but one kid as he was going through, the ages, just to make sure I'm clear about that. But that was hard, that was challenging. There are sometimes I would be up until 4 o'clock in the morning working on a paper, sleep for an hour, and then wake back up and have to go to work all day and lead people, lead large teams from a place of confidence and not wanting to fall asleep at my desk. And so when you start to actually step in what the story is and actually divulge the information and actually tell your story, it's very powerful. It's very, very powerful. You have to get past the fear of what people think. So part of it is, what comes up for you? Identify the fears. I'm nervous that when you hear this, you're going to discredit my work. I'm nervous that when you hear this, that you're now going to officially think I don't know what I'm talking about or that I can't help you because I've gone through things. And so those aren't true. The more I tell my story, actually, the more business I've gotten, I'll be honest, because people are actually like, okay, you're a real person. You're not just showing up on Instagram, just putting out a lot of BS and faking it and acting like that you have this lifestyle. No. I mean, it's a lifestyle that I've had to grow into, and I've been down, I've been up, and life isn't perfect. So the first thing is definitely identifying what's the fear. And then what are some ways that you can overcome your fear? Maybe you're telling a small part of your story, maybe you're not telling the full story, maybe you're practicing your story. That, like, what do you need to overcome your fear? Obstacle 2, not understanding which part of your story to tell. I have the transformational story. So, based on your current audience and the services you provide, what story do you think is going to resonate? What I love is when people talk about their mission. Like, for example, we have a client, amazing, amazing, amazing in so many ways. She's a physician, and her practice is built on a very, very powerful story. So anytime she's stressed, anytime she's like, oh, I want to give it up, we always go back to what's the story. And then also, when you dig through that story, it goes back to just even some of her journey, right? And so when we're talking about these things, your story has power because it's going to allow for you to show up. It's part of your why. And so when on the days that are tough and on the days that are hard, when you go back to why am I doing what I'm doing? Why? Whether if it's personal, whether if it's about the people that you're meant to help, it allows for you to pull up the pants and to go out and to do the work that you're meant to do in a different way. It allows for you to kind of get through, like, man, this is a rough day. I don't feel like doing that. I don't feel like doing this today. I don't feel like showing up today. It allows for you to step through that. Or this feels scary. I don't know if I want to speak on that stage, or I don't know if I want to be on that podcast, or I don't know if I want to write that book. It allows for you to step into something bigger, but you have to understand which story. So, which part of your story do you want to tell? For me, I've been featured. but I've only been featured for part of my stories. Part of my stories was single mom. Part of my stories was the bankruptcy story because I've been able to, like, there's a, like, it's a rags to riches type story. I've been featured for overcoming challenges because I have, like, I've been able to overcome a lot of challenges. Even in the course of my career, I was the only Black woman in so many rooms, especially once you get to the C-suite. And I've been the youngest. I've been the only Black woman. Some of I've been the only woman and just sitting there. So at the end of the day, which story do you want to tell? And, how are you gonna help? Like, how's this story? If you tell this story, how is it gonna help? How is it gonna help people? Because a lot of times what happens is people, they'll just show up and talk about random stuff, and it's like, what does that have to do with anything? Because we do have to remember, when you're building a personal brand, the personal brand is there. It needs to be connected to somebody or connected to something. And so if you're just sitting there just divulging all this information about yourself, then yeah, that could be oversharing and it could not make sense. Because at the end of the day, how is this gonna help me? But when you tell a story in like a really great framework, and if you tell a story in a way that it resonates with the people who are listening, they're going to see themselves in your story, and then they're going to resonate with you, and then they will resonate with your practice, and then they will resonate with what you got going on in the world. So even if you go and you write that book, guess what? They're resonating with you and your story, and now they're going to go buy your book, or they're going to go to whatever conference that you might be speaking at and speaking on the stage. I mean, that's how that works, but you have to be very intentional about the story that you're telling. So, a lot of times the obstacle, not understanding which part of your story to tell and just telling the wrong story because you think like, oh, they told me to show up and talk about my story. So let me just talk about this random story. What does that have to do with anything? Obstacle 3, lack of clarity for the end goal. So this ties back to obstacle 2. Like, if you understand, like, what's the end goal here? Why am I even talking about this story? Like, what's the point? Then that's gonna allow for you to know which story to tell. So, for example, for me, I know most of the clients that we have are people of color and women of color. Like, that's who gets attracted to me, and I'm not mad at it. And because of that, I know that there is a lot of obstacles that we have had to overcome. So I like to talk about the obstacles because that way, if you're showing up and you are telling me I'm building large amounts of wealth, or I'm stepping into a new financial category and I'm feeling some kind of way about this, and my family isn't able to resonate with me, I get it, and because I've been there and I understand it. Or if you're showing up and you're saying, my family requires a lot, or just because of families when it comes to people of color. And for me, there's the thing of black tax, and so there's a lot, and so whenever you're thinking about your story, I tell my story. I've been intentional about telling my story in different parts of my story because I want my clients to know, and for people who become part of my community, that they're safe. That I get it. I maybe am not exactly in your shoes, but I can resonate with it from my experience and from what I've gone through. So, lack of clarity for the end goal. For me, I'm trying to make sure I build trust. It's important for folks to know that they can trust me from a place of integrity, that I have my own stories, my own challenges that I've been able to overcome. And so when you work with me, you're okay. It is okay for you to show up and to not have to be perfect, or it's okay for you to show up and to say, I'm struggling with this, and for it to be fine. So those are the obstacles. So again, the top 3 obstacles for when it comes to telling your story, again, fear of what people will think, not understanding which part of your story to tell, and then lack of clarity for the end goal. So when you actually are able to put all that together, then that's where the fun starts to happen, right? And so you start to identify, like, you get past the fear, you start to identify with stories, and then you start to understand, like, okay, well, I want to tell this story. I'm going to pitch this story. Like, I remember when I got my first feature, it was Pop Sugar. It was huge. And I was like, oh my gosh, but it was because my story it was timely. It was very timely. It was when everything was happening with George Floyd, and just during, his murder. And so it was very timely. And so I wrote about, again, me raising a young Black man, and some of the story and some of the things that we were going through in trying to raise him. And so that resonated. So here are 5 actions for you to take when you are trying to get featured. First one, identify your transformational stories. So you want to think about the 3 to 4 key moments from your childhood, your teenage years, and your adult years. So this was the exercise that I went through that was so helpful. And it's the exercise that we actually put our clients through. And really identifying too, like what emotions came up for you during that time. So I always say that when you're on a good story when you are literally it brings tears in your eyes. So even when I think about everything, because my son, I just posted on social media actually, like my son he just signed his NCAA eligibility. So he's going to be going to play college basketball. Whoop whoop. I'm so excited. That's emotional for me, right? And so when I think about like everything that we have gone through and things that I've gone through to make sure I'm putting him in a position to be successful and all this stuff, like that brings tears to my eyes. So when you are in a good story because you will have tears. If there's no tears, that means that you need to find a new story because your story should feel nervous to talk about. Like even with this podcast, it's probably going to take a lot for me to actually even give this to the podcast manager to publish because I am feeling nervous. I'm feeling very vulnerable right now. But that's how your story should feel. So if you are not feeling emotionally tied to this story, or if it doesn't bring out any kind of tears or vulnerability, you need to find a new story. So, action 2 is step into your audience shoes. So, identify the aspects and details of your story that truly matter to your audience. This is where the intentionality comes into play, right? So, what are your audience's struggles and pain points that relate to your stories? So, part of the story I tell, even with burnout, I know a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, they're burnt out. You're tired. You're overwhelmed. I've been there. I have that story where your team is inefficient, your team is driving you crazy, where you're working too many hours, where the family is getting put on the back burner, you're putting yourself on the back burner. That is my story. So I show up and tell that story because that resonates with my son sitting on the ground in the office coloring because I'm working on the weekends. All of those stories translate because those are the stories of my clients, whether they need to spend more time with their families and they're putting the practice first, or whether their team is not efficient and they're burnt out and they're tired and they want to sell their practices for a dollar. All of that comes from from where I've been. And so I talk about that story. So step into your audience shoes. Action three, pay attention to what's relevant now. So, is there anything when it comes to your story that is relevant to what's happening in today's time? The economy right now is a little cuckoo. We're getting ready to go into a presidential election, and there's all this stuff that's happening throughout the whole world. And so part of the story is building practices, growing practices, leading practices through different economies. It's part of my expertise. So I was asked specifically to talk about that. Not too many people, have experiences building their practices in weird economies. So how I show up and strategize, or even with me saying with the job market, is a challenging job market. It's not impossible to hire the right person, but it's a little bit, it takes a little bit more effort. You have to have more of a marketing strategy to find the right team member. I've been there, I've done it. So really paying attention to what's relevant now. So when I got asked about how to build practices and with the potential recession, which we never officially went into one. But because I've been through that, I've talked about that, then I got asked to speak on it. So when you start to identify, like, okay, well, what's happening in the world now and what story do I have that can be relevant to that? Guess what? You'll get more notice, you'll get more visibility. The one thing that you have to pay attention to is, what makes your story and point of view unique. So for me, I love multi-specialty. I absolutely positively love multi-specialty. I think that it's so powerful when you can get different ideas from different industries. And so for me, with my healthcare experience, I've worked in a lot of different specialties. And I think that it's harmful when you only look to one type of specialty for what you can do in your practice. I think it's very powerful when you start to look at different specialties for what you can do inside of your practice. And if you look at the most powerful and the most lucrative and the most, the practices that are here and aren't being bought up, by healthcare systems, is because they have multidisciplinary and they're multi specialty. They help their patients and clients in such a deeper way. So I really love when clients come and they say, "Oh, I wanna add a different type of specialty, or I wanna hire a different provider." I think that's great. I love that. I think that that makes your practice more powerful. Now there is a format that you need to follow when you do these things, but that's different. A lot of the business coaches, they're amazing and wonderful and fantastic, and they definitely bring a unique skill set to the space. I'm a little bit different because I don't just talk to one specialty. And it's the reason why I continue to say private practice owners. And I refuse to say one type of provider. And it's because for me, what makes me different is I know when you get with things collectively. When I was working in cardiology, I learned a lot from primary care. When I was working in primary care, I learned a lot from cardiology. When I was working in urgent care, I learned a lot from the asthma and allergy practice that I worked with. So there's a lot of power when you actually can step outside of your specialty and learn from other specialties. So I love when folks come to me. It's the reason why at this point in time I work with therapists, I work with physicians, I work with physical therapists, I work with a chiropractor, I work with lactation consultants, I work with speech therapy, occupational therapy. Yeah, so there's a number of different people who I have in my circle and a number of different, practices that I'm kind of giving information to. And it's really powerful. It's very, very powerful. So like I said, when you look at your practice, I don't look at your practice the same way. And so that's what makes me unique. That's my different point of view. Leverage your skills, strengths, and expertise is action number 4. What are your skills? What are your strengths? What's your expertise? So when you talk about this, then that's very powerful too. So again, my skill set, you guys know, years and years and years of healthcare business and leadership experience. I've hired hundreds of people, been in the C suite. I've been able to turn hot meds practices into well oiled machines. And I show up and I talk about it at length. And so when I talk about owning your CEO status, it's not just owning the CEO status of your business. It's not coming from a corporate jargon. No, it's about stepping into something bigger and going after what you want in order to have a life and practice you love. So I leverage my skill set. I leverage my expertise. That's the number reason why even on my Instagram, I say I'm the number one CEO coach for private practice owners. Leverage your skills and your strengths and your expertise. For you are credentialed. You have more education than what the like most normal people have. And there are people who are less experienced, have less expertise, who are showing up talking about very similar topics who have no business talking about it. Tell your story. Definitely tell your story. Tell your story, talk about your expertise, talk about your strengths, talk about what you know, because when you do that, it's easier for you to get featured. People are looking for your credential. People are looking for people who are just tried and true, right? And so for me, I have a master's degree, a business degree, specifically for healthcare. And so with that, that adds to my credential. It's why I'm able to show up and talk about things in a different type of way. I've taken multiple accounting classes. I've taken multiple leadership classes. I've taken multiple business classes. I've taken, multiple coaching classes. Even before I became a coach, I was taking coaching classes because team members need to be coached and mentored. So what are your skills and strengths and expertise? Action 5, be bold in your pitch. Be bold. Go after places that you don't even think, like, I don't know if they're going to feature me today. One of my clients, she always talks about 10x. So there's a book, I believe it's Dan Sullivan, I think. 10x is better than 2x. And so when you come from a place of 10x, hey, that's going on the Today Show. Be bold in where you want to get featured. Be bold in your pitch and then build relationships. Sometimes it takes time. One of the things that I do, I know that there's different contributors for different magazines and different things too. And so sometimes it's just building the relationship and just, checking in and not always just going after the pitch, but building the relationship. And so when you continue to do great work in the world, people will notice and they will ask, "Hey, can you write something? Hey, can you be on my podcast? Hey, can you speak to my group?" And all you have to do is just build the relationships and then don't be scared and step into the authority that you have in the space. So that is the podcast. That is the podcast. So I am definitely feeling all the feels. for as I'm divulging this information to you. But I know that it's needed. I know that you are sitting on so much greatness to help to help those that you're meant to help your clients and patients in a different way, to help your colleagues, to be able to definitely show what's possible when we are stepping into this thing of, building a brand and building authority for your space. So again, those action steps that you're going to take, because I already went through the obstacles. Action 1, identify your transformational stories. Action 2, step into your audience's shoes. Action 3, pay attention to what's relevant now. Action 4, leverage your skills, strengths, and expertise. Action 5, be bold in your pitch and build relationships. So I hope that you have an amazing day. Go out, tell your story, and be bold in your story. Be authentic in your story. And it's okay to be a little bit vulnerable. So the right people will find you. The right people can, if it's like, oh, that's too much, then they can go someplace else. So it is okay. Your right person will find you. I do know that. So enjoy your day, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the episode and it empowers you as the CEO of your practice. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure you subscribe, share the message, and leave a review. If you want more information and support in growing and scaling your practice, click the link in the show notes to take advantage of our free resources or apply to work with me directly. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.